and understanding that you are your greatest asset. Not a stock, not a bond, not a piece of real estate. So if you don't take good care of yourself, you don't have very much to give. And if you're constantly in constraint and restraint, then you don't learn how to invest, because every dollar becomes a cost to people in the scarcity mindset instead of dollars that become an investment. I look the financial part, long hair and all that kind of stuff. Don't tuck in my shirt, because most of finance is really a load of crap when it comes down to it. I mean, I'm sure you guys have been shoveled the whole notion of if you just save enough money, sacrifice, scrimp, save, defer, delay, one day, someday, you can have this, pile of money in the stock market. But the problem is the stock market has overpromised and underperformed for the majority of people. We did a study, and when I say we have two kind of full-time guys, and one of them, Steven, went and did this research where he said, all right, what's the stock market actually done between the year 2000 and the year 2015, and we adjust it for inflation, which, by the way, what do they say the stock market averages? 8% since 2000 BC or some nonsense like that, right? So what we found is 8% was accurate. It was 8.4% total over that period of time. So that isn't really going to get people too far ahead. And the matter of fact is that you have a business that should far exceed and outperform any of that. And a business is something that you understand, that you relate to, yet at the same time, you're supposed to take money from that business and set it into investments that are highly speculative, that are hard to understand when they're going to pay off, how they're going to work, why they would earn a rate of return, how you're going to benefit from them. Yet that's what people are sold all day long. Now, the other thing that we're sold, and I'm sure you've heard it, is to live within your means, right? Everyone's hard to live within your means. When I submitted that for the title, Yannick denied it. He said that no one would show up, right? Because that's a pretty painful notion, live within your means. What do you think about doing with that? Cutting back, restriction. And here's the deal, no one shrinks their way to wealth. So if you start thinking in a reductionist mindset, it actually limits wealth, not grows it. But living within your means is good advice from the standpoint of you shouldn't spend a whole bunch more money than what you make and end up in a train wreck type of situation. But the thing is, what I want to focus on today is a different way to live within your means, to be more efficient within your means, to find money and reclaim money that's rightfully yours, especially considering, I think, one of the major dangers to all entrepreneurs as we move forward is that there's this ridiculously massive deficit. And we can watch the news and get all depressed about that because, it is kind of frustrating, or we could do something different, which is take some action where you can be really proactive around your taxes. And when they inevitably increase taxes, which, by the way, anyone think they're lowering taxes in the near future by a show of hands, right? So, and right now we're at a historical low, by the way. Since the tax code came out in 1913, what do you think the average top rate has been? 67%. It's at 40% right now. So there's a lot of people that are deferring taxes into a future where they're gonna just get hit with major taxes. So I'd rather save you things than just have you delay things. So this will probably be different advice than a lot of your accountants have given you up until this point. And my objective is to make sure to give you things that you can put on the ground and implement immediately, whether you ever talk to us again or not, whether you ever see me again or not. I wanna make sure to give you a framework that in understanding this framework, you can avoid the two major tax traps that most people fall victim to. And these tax traps absolutely are going to confiscate your wealth over time. But then I'm going to give you the three-part framework of how you could save a massive amount of taxes. And had lunch today with Ryan Levesque. He's in the program, so I was telling him about some things he could do to cut some of his taxes in half. And I was talking to, Pete Vargas was at that table. We're talking about taxes. I mean, I know that's not an exciting topic for a lot of people, but I think keeping a bunch of money, and if I could simplify the tax thing for you, because there's 77,000 supporting pages and documents around the tax code, and that's why 93% of entrepreneurs overpay on their taxes. First of all, you might have this entrepreneurial disease called I'll just earn more. Anyone ever thought that? I'll just earn my way out of that, right? And that's kind of like that proverbial treadmill. You get on and you run faster, you run harder. But if you have a whole bunch of leaks and you're disorganized in your finances, more money, as the poet laureate Biggie Smalls said, more problems, right? More money, more problems. So I want to make sure that if there's more money, there's more that you keep. And the more that you make, there's an exponential amount that you get to keep. So that's why we're going to emphasize and focus a little bit on the second way to live within your means, which is to be efficient within your means. Just to have efficiency, optimize your cash flow. Then the third way to live within your means, I think, is the most critical thing, and it's probably why you're here in the first place, and that's to continually expand your means. Play a value creation game where you can impact people at a deeper way, or that you can impact more people, therefore making more money, because dollars follow value. So the more value you can offer in the world, the more money you're gonna make. And really, there's kind of a framework out there that leads towards economic independence. So what I mean by economic independence is when you have enough investment income and some entrepreneurial income. The problem with entrepreneurial income is it's awesome, but it still does take quite a bit of a management, even if it's not you directly responsible for it. But it's still, if you can have income that comes in, even if you don't show up to the office or the basement for some of you, working in your underwear or whatever it is, that happens with internet marketers at times. But if you look at that and say, if you could create recurring revenue as the objective, recurring revenue to cover your basic expenses in life, that's economic independence. And why that's a really critical state to be in is if you can create that economic independent situation, that means every dollar you earn above and beyond your recurring revenue that doesn't cover your expenses isn't encumbered by lifestyle and go towards building assets. That's where exponential growth exists. Exponential growth doesn't exist in compound interest, even though I know you've been taught and trained that compound interest is some magical thing. Hell, it takes 30 years for it to ever kick in. I mean, how many people do you know other than the financial institutions that are rich because of compound interest? I remember Coach Dupin in junior high, man. I think he's rich because of compound interest, but at the same time, he still has the first dollar he ever made. He walked around this little small coal mining town I grew up in his cowboy boots everywhere around town, has the first vehicle that he ever bought that never drives anywhere because he probably have to put gas in it and that would cost him some money, and lives in the same little house that you could probably buy for 20 grand. And I think that he's probably doing okay because of compound interest, because he never utilized his money. And yet I think much of what you've been told is almost to make you feel guilty, like you should have started earlier, you should have saved more money earlier on, but you built a business. That is a huge advantage. As a matter of fact, 91% of people worth $5 million or more have one thing in common. I guess more than one because they're human beings and they're alive. But they all own a damn business. And so all these financial books that you go out there and you read, they miss the most major component of what drives and generates wealth. I know that they want you to believe investing is synonymous with the stock market, and for some people it is, but for 90+% of the population, they don't even know what's going on in the stock market. They don't study it. As a matter of fact, I'm in the world of finance and I have no money in the stock market because the stock I care about are the businesses that I'm involved in. And then I have a basic infrastructure I called cash flow banking that I learned by studying what the Rockefellers do, and I wrote a book called What Would the Rockefellers Do? I'll make sure to just give you guys a free copy, because if you go to buy it on Amazon, it's $1,000, because I don't want financial advisors buying it and bastardizing what I'm teaching here. So I just want to give it directly to people instead of advisors. And it just makes it seem more valuable if I put $1,000 up on Amazon. You're like, oh shit, this is a good book, it's $1,000. I mean, that's just a book, right? Yes, it's a book, but it's so valuable, because here's the premise of that book. Cornelius Vanderbilt had more money than the US Treasury at one time. He died, and 54 years later, the first Vanderbilt died broke. So the Vanderbilt fortune has been absolutely decimated because they didn't understand how to translate and transfer wealth. As a matter of fact, most people never make it past the third generation, yet the Rockefellers are on their sixth generation of passing on wealth. They still donated $50 million to charity last year, and the net worth is growing, not diminishing. So I thought that would be something worthwhile to study. And what I realized is when it comes to the poor, the middle class, and even the working wealthy like entrepreneurs, a lot of times entrepreneurs have most of their wealth inside of their business, and therefore they miss out on how they can really build and sustain and pass on wealth because they don't take time to think about that because they're thinking about how to make more money. So first of all, if I can help them keep more money, but number two, if you could learn some of the Rockefeller method and their methodology, I think it'll help you leave more money behind, and not just behind, but live better along the way, because a lot of people, early on in my life, I kind of read The Millionaire Next Door. Anyone read that book, Millionaire Next Door? If you haven't read it, this is the spoiler alert. If you're willing to be a miserable human being that never spends any money your whole life, you can die with millions of dollars, but live broke, all right? It's kind of like Ebenezer Scrooge before the three ghosts, It's like if you just drive a vehicle that's a jalopy that you hate, and if you just never buy anything new, You can pinch pennies till you get blisters on your fingers and tell people you're a millionaire because they would never know it by knowing you. You ever have friends that are like that? Hell, I have a friend in Vegas that's like that. I don't even know that we're friends anymore because I'm not going to go visit him because I remember we pulled onto the freeway and like his hubcap starts rolling out and it's probably going to kill someone on the freeway. He's got his antenna, which was actually a hanger that was dismantled. And then you get to his house, and Vegas is known to get warm in the summer. Well, it was warmer in his house. I saw he had his thermostat on 87, and I was like, hey, bro, if I give you $5, can we turn it down to 70? Like, what would it take? Maybe you can make money on me. I'll pay more than that if we can just get air conditioning working. You know they have that in today's world. So, see, the problem is that mindset is born and comes from scarcity, of lack, of fear, of doubt. And that kind of savings mindset is people don't actually save themselves rich, yet if they live that way, they miss out on living wealthy. And Benjamin Franklin said, wealth isn't the man that has it, but the man that lives it. So I believe that there's a way to live a great life along the way and yet have plenty of money in the future that leads towards sustainable wealth. But a lot of it comes from just basic financial philosophies. It comes from just basic principles that most people never hear about. And the reason is, in the world of finance, they can't sell you these philosophies because it's against how they get compensated. I mean, think about it. In the world of finance, and I'll admit, I was a finance guy, just the normal guy peddling products. I sold mutual funds in 1998, 1999, and life insurance. I told people I was a financial planner because I woke up one day and passed a test, so that apparently made me a financial planner because, you just say it, and then they go, oh, great, And then I sold them the mutual funds, and in 98, 99, in my little hometown, I was like the Doogie Howser, and there might be people that don't remember Doogie Howser, but Doogie Howser, MD, this boy genius, he's a doctor, he's still a teenager. I was that in finance for 2 years until the year 2000 came. And then the market starts going down. And now I'm going to family reunions because, look, I'm a 19 and 20-year-old at the time, so who are my clients? Mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, the parents of my friends that guilt their parents into, hey, you should give Garrett a chance. And I was articulate enough to convince them to hand money over to me. But then I just passed that money on to someone else that I had never met with a bunch of stocks that I had never even known which stocks were being held inside of here, just the top 10, with companies that I'd never been in their boardroom. I'd never read a single damn report. And as a matter of fact, some of them had changed fund managers from the time I originally sold it, but I didn't even know that because I was simply a product peddler. Because how did I get paid? By transactions. So that's what I did. Until the year 2000, when the market started to go down and you go to family reunions and no longer you Doogie Howser, you're Satan. It's like, hey, what the hell's going on here? And you know what my firms told me to tell everyone? I'm sure you've heard this nonsense. You're in it for the long haul. That's the ultimate statement to say, hell, I'm not responsible. No one's responsible. Because when does the long haul end? Yeah, never. I guess when you die, but then someone else inherits at that point, right? Like, that's a horrible notion. Or have you ever heard the market's on sale? Yeah, that's a crappy sell if you've already bought, by the way. Or dollar cost average. You heard the notion dollar cost average? Are you guys here because you want to be average? Show of hands, you came here to be average. I mean, they're even marketing that it's an average strategy. And not even average, that's just what they say. And the word average is so misleading because let's just think about it. In the world of finance, this is part of the reason I got kicked off CNBC. Yannick said I was on CNBC. That was a one-time gig, and the show finished, and I've never heard anything again. Because apparently, if you tell people not to put money in the market, and then they cut to the commercial of people throwing rocks on a beach while they drink Corona till their livers give out, that's not what they want to hear. But the good news is ABC let me do 13 different segments, and the people interviewing me actually changed their opinion over time. Because the first time I was on, they thought I was joking with some of my advice because I said people should stop contributing to their retirement plans. And they're like, wow, we don't usually get that kind of advice. I'm like, I know people are struggling massively with the kind of advice that they've been getting, right? So that's just useless facts for you right there, all right? Really important for you guys to know all this kind of stuff. But what I was talking about is the term average is misleading. It's a marketing term in the world of finance. So let's say you have 100 grand and you lose 10%. I know heavy math here, right? I think we can all do this. What ends up after that? Lose 10% of 100 grand? 90 grand, right? Now, you just hear on the news, the market has rallied. It's come back. It's back up 10%. What's your 90 grand at? 99. But as they're saying, your average is 0% at that point. But you're actually down. You've actually lost. Plus they took out fees because they don't forgive those fees when they don't perform, right? So average is pretty misleading. You know, like you could be standing in a shower with 2 shower heads, turn one to freezing cold, the other one to scalding hot, and on average you're at a cool temperature, right? Averages are just misleading, that's the bottom line. And there's a lot of that misinformation that gets people to stay invested. And you know, look, we should all be so lucky to have the kind of retention rates as financial planners. 8 years. Can you imagine keeping a customer without much effort for 8 years? I mean, why? Because they have the fees come out without having to write a check. Think about it. When you got robbed in the old days, they showed up on horses. They had guns. It's like, oh shit, we just got robbed. Now it just automatically comes out of your account. And you're like, what happened to my money? And they're like, oh, we only charged you 0.85%, less than 1%. Oh, really? Let's just calculate that really quick. $100,000 invested over 30 years, and they show a 10% rate of return, which isn't going to happen, but they'll show it, grows to 1.74 million. That's exciting, right? Until you take out the 0.85%, it only grows to 1.4 million. So it's a $340,000 cost to you. So once again, we got to be careful with being misled by all the money that goes into convincing us to separate ourselves from our money simply in the name of having a better future that for far too many people they never experience. And even worse is if you prematurely diversify. Now, put the word premature before a lot of things, and how does that turn out? Unfortunate, yeah, like premature babies is what I was thinking, you know? And I'm sure that's where your guys' head went right out the, just for sure, you're like premature babies. Yes, that's not fully baked yet. Sorry, you know, the jokes don't get any better, but if you laugh, it makes me feel good anyway, and I'll give you a really good tax strategy in exchange for that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Definitely giving you the free $1,000 book right there. You've earned it for sure. So, look, let me just get to quickly through how the framework works to create economic independence, so we could dispel this notion of, you know, investing for retirement, because entrepreneurs, when they turn age 65, 92% of them could not stop working and still cover their expenses. It just doesn't happen. Why? Because it's an antiquated, problematic model where you're being taught to accumulate through deferral, through sacrifice, and through saving. And budgeting sucks. That's why my next book's called Budgeting Sucks, is because no one wants to budget unless they're a weirdo. There's some weirdos in here that like to budget, right? But for the most part, we don't love budgeting. And the reason is it doesn't actually work because it puts you in a scarcity mindset and has you think about constraint. So here's the alternative to budgeting, because as I give you these strategies that are going to put money in your pocket, this is where I want you to capture it. So if there's one action you take from this talk, this next action is it. So be ready to take notes, all right? And it has nothing to do with my company. You just go to wherever you're currently working. The key is you set up a wealth capture account. It's a separate account than your business checking and your personal checking. What I found is businesses have insatiable appetites. We can always find stagnant money can find a place to go in a business if it sits there for too long. On the personal side, you know, some of you might be deep savers, but some of you might be spenders, or some of you might, you know, be addicted to really nice lifestyles, because what I found is a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. I grew up in a coal mining town. We stayed in, you know, motels, and now I stay at boutique places, and it's like, that's a lot different price range, you know? And I asked my wife, I said, hey, if we ever went broke, what would you miss most? She goes, where we stay, those damn hotels. Because, you know, when we first were together, I read Millionaire Next Door. I was gonna pinch my way to wealth and like save every penny, to the point where she was like, this was a big mistake. I think she thought that. She may have said it to family and friends. She was probably not willing to admit it to me, but thank God I kind of had an epiphany and transferred into the concept of more thinking abundantly and thinking about exchange and thinking about value creation and thinking about enjoying life along the way, and understanding that you are your greatest asset. Not a stock, not a bond, not a piece of real estate. So if you don't take good care of yourself, you don't have very much to give. And if you're constantly in constraint and restraint, then you don't learn how to invest, because every dollar becomes a cost to people in the scarcity mindset instead of dollars that become an investment. An investment, you put $1 in something, more than $1 comes out. How much should you budget for that? Infinite, until it doesn't perform anymore. That's why budgeting is a stupid-ass notion, and I'm about to dispel it for all of you so that you can live a freer life. Would that be worth coming to? Okay, good. Now I'm hyping it up like a son of a bitch, I better deliver here. So, all right. So here's the deal. You set up a separate account, and I should make this seem like it's more magical and more difficult. It's so easy, but so profound. You set up a separate account at wherever you're banking. You need to make sure it has a sweep relationship, S-W-E-E-P, not sweet, a sweep relationship, where you can automatically sweep money into this account. So when you go to pay yourself, you take money from your business and you pay yourself personally, which if you're not doing, what the hell's wrong with you? We need to talk, because we'll get that money back from the government so you can start paying yourself more. But when you go to pay yourself, you just pay yourself first, right? Before you pay bills, before it goes to lifestyle, you take a percentage off the top. My recommended percentage is 18%. Now, there's a reason for that 18%. 3% because I think taxes are going to increase. 3% for planned obsolescence because I just bought a house not that long ago, and our stupid Viking dishwasher doesn't wash dishes, apparently. I literally think there's Vikings in there licking the dishes, like it is just, so we had to get a new, that's called planned obsolescence. You just have to replace stuff over time, right? Another 3% for technological change. Because even over by the rescue mission over here, there's still homeless people with cell phones. I mean, it's amazing. Technology changes our world, and there's certain things you're going to start to acquire that don't even exist today. Another 3% is for inflation. And that's probably low, but I'm just saying we got to be able to handle the fact that our dollars erode over time and our purchasing power goes down. Another 3% for one of my favorite things, which is propensity to consume, which means a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. We just like to buy nicer things over time, hopefully. Hopefully we continue to increase our lifestyle. And the last 3% will probably be your favorite, which is simply you set up a second account. So you have two accounts you're going to set up, your wealth capture account and your living wealthy account. Wealth capture, all 18% off the top goes there. Melinda, you've been doing this for a year now, right? Yes. Right, so she could tell you. Yeah, so I taught her this a year ago. She's been doing it for a year. Working? It is. Absolutely. So I even answered for you. Is it working? Yes, it is. Yes. So, I probably should let you answer. All right, so this living wealthy account is you just take 1/6 of what you pay into the wealth capture and you put it in your living wealthy account, and this is the rule. Guilt-free spending. That's your reward for paying yourself first, that you get to spend that on whatever you want. Mine is probably heroin. I mean, maybe like psychedelics and stuff are fine, but heroin, I don't know. I just don't know. I haven't been convinced that that could be a good thing, but yeah, what do you want to spend it on? You just treat and reward yourself with no guilt. Guilt-free spending, all right? You pay yourself first. Now, if you feel like 18% is hard to get to, that's where we're going to next. I'm going to show you how to get there. I just want you to set up this account, because if you don't set up the account, here's what happens. Parkinson's law kicks in. Parkinson's law states that when you have an increase in your income, if you don't have an infrastructure to capture that increase, within 3 to 6 months, your expenses will rise to meet or they'll actually exceed that increase. Have you ever met that person making more money now than ever before in their life, in more trouble than they've ever been in their life? Sometimes entrepreneurs spend optimism. They have a great month, and they extrapolate that as their income for the rest of their life, and that's just going to keep going up. And then all of a sudden, a logarithm changes, or something happens. There's a merchant account goes out, or they hold your money. I mean, there's a number of things. An employee embezzles. I mean, we are in store in our life for financial surprises. We just don't know when or how severe. So be careful not to spend optimism. But here's the good news: if you pay yourself 18%, then just once a month, find an accountability partner. It could be an accountant, it could be a spouse. You just have one person you meet with once a month to look and say, with the rest of the money, did I stay in bounds? I didn't borrow to spend, did I? I didn't spend more than what I made, did I? And if you did, that's all you got to do to eliminate budgeting. All right? Pay yourself first, and then make sure you stay in bounds. Now that we've got that, I can now give you the tax strategies and help you implement. And there's people in the room that have heard these tax strategies just this week, Michael. So you can keep working, and you don't even have to pay attention for a second. Great. All right. Tax traps. The first two that you have to avoid. Number one, don't just defer taxes. So this means 401ks, IRAs, RSPs, Keoghs, thrift savings plan, I don't care, whatever it's called. If it's a government qualified plan that you put your money in pre-tax, You defer your tax to the future. You didn't save tax. Did you pay less tax the year you put it in? Yes, you did. But why did you pay less? Because you never took constructive receipt of the money. The plan took receipt of the money, and now the government owns the plan for your benefit. Who in here is excited to be in partnership with the government moving forward? I mean, imagine this. Imagine that you said, okay, the government's going to be my partner. They said they're only going to be a 40% partner today, but if I want to exit early, they're a 50% partner. And when I said, cool, that's fixed, right? They said, no. I'll tell you what my percentage is in the future, depending on what my economic circumstance is that you have no control over. That is your retirement plan. So if you put money in there and you don't know how you're going to get the money out, you're going to be pissed off when you find out you still have to pay taxes on it. So you didn't get tax savings in your pocket. Your tax savings are stuck in the plan, and it is a great big lie and hoax when they say you have $10,000 in there from a deposit. You don't have $10,000, you have $5,000. $5,000 is the government's money right now, unless you can find a way to offset that or avoid that penalty. It is a lack of disclosure, and it's problematic. Deferring tax does not save it, especially considering we're at a historically low tax bracket right now, not a historically high. Now, who plans on making more money in the future? Show of hands, right? When financial planners tell you you're gonna be in a lower tax bracket, you should slap them in the face or at least give them a squirrel tap if you know what that is, you know? It's like, are you kidding me? Who wants to have less money in the future? I mean, especially if you plan on retiring. I don't really love this concept of retirement because the definition of retirement is to take out to pasture or to, die essentially. So that doesn't sound exciting to me. I'd rather have something I'm engaged in and then just enjoy life along the way so I don't just work myself to death for the one day someday when I have a replaced hip that I'm gonna go out and enjoy life and be on the beach when I'm, so damn wrinkled, no one cares. I mean, it's like, I don't love this notion of deferral for your entire thing. It's a crazy notion, and thinking you're going to have less money in the future is a nightmare. Because think about people in 1980, if you said, what's a good amount of money to have in a retirement plan, what do you think they said? Maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million if they were really thinking big. Now today, if someone told you, hey, you can never make more than $1 million the rest of your life total, who's scared? Immediately, yeah, that's not very much money, is it? By the way, I'm trying to see if I could speak faster than any other speaker. How am I doing so far? I just realized how fast I'm speaking. So, but you'll catch something. It's cool. I'm gonna take a break, let you process while I have a little drink here. So avoid deferral. The second thing to avoid, don't spend $1 to save 40 cents. It doesn't make sense. That's the tax tail wagging the dog. Had this guy, Gary, call me once, and he's like, he just started working with us in November. It's December. He says, hey, my accountant just told me congratulations. Which, by the way, that smug-ass accountant that says congratulations when you owe tax deserves to be tortured. They need to go to Gitmo. I feel like that's the only thing, because what the hell? Congratulations? You owe an extra $251,000 to the government. What a good year. Come on, that is horrible. That would just piss me off. And this guy was pissed, so he's like, what do I need to buy? And I'm like, well, what would you buy if you didn't have this tax bill? He goes, well, I wouldn't be buying anything. I'm like, great, then we're not gonna buy anything. He's like, well, what about the taxes? I asked a few questions. I'm like, why is it such a big surprise that you have this money, that you made this money, and why are you finding out about it now? He goes, oh, I just had an event. We made an extra $500,000 than what we anticipated. It went so well. And I was like, cool, well, what did you sell? He said, well, coaching, and I'll be working with people throughout the year, this year, next year. I'm like, whoa, so you haven't actually performed, or they haven't rendered the services? He's like, no. I'm like, great, we'll move you to accrual. Now, everyone in the room shouldn't go to accrual. It is more complicated and expensive, but this person had a $251,000 problem that we were able to defer to the next year, and I know I said you never defer, but I'm deferring 1 year. And the rule is, if you have an exit strategy, you can defer. If you don't have an exit strategy, you can't. So I'm just deferring for 1 year. I moved $249,000, which gave us 12 more months to figure out the tax strategy, which we saved 100% of that, which I'll tell you how we did it in the rest of the stories here. So don't just spend to save, and don't just defer. So what do you do? Here's the 3 things to do. The first one, I think, will apply to nearly everyone other than a few of you geniuses out there that somehow are nerdy enough to figure this out on your own, all right? The first one is, if you're a business, by the way, if you're an LLC or an S-Corp, just so you know, if you ever get audited, you don't get the most premier auditors, you get the newest auditors. C corporations are reserved for the highest level auditors, just so you know. Just a little fun fact to keep in your back pocket. But what I find atrocious for business owners is most of them have a ton of expenses that could become deductions, and they don't take the deduction. First of all, because they have some yahoo that says they're an accountant that's not really a tax strategist. If you have an accountant that tells you they're conservative, what that's code for is they're missing tax deductions for you. That's just what it really means. Now, I don't believe you should do anything unethical or illegal, but I also don't think you should tip the government unnecessarily. So, if you have expenses that can relate to the business in any way, those are actually deductions. So, here's some examples. Siobhan came to my house recently because we had an event, and when it came over, we had 12 people, and it was right in the middle of the outdoor recreation show in Salt Lake City, which, by the way, it's really tough to get hotels or venue space. And so what I was able to do is charge a $7,500 charge to my business to rent my house to host this 12-person dinner. And that's tax deductible to the business, but as long as I do that less than 14 days in the year, it's tax-free to me. 14 days or less. So I just have a simple executive lease. I always make sure to have at least 14 functions throughout the year. And Google was going to film a commercial in my house, and they were going to pay me $2,500 an hour. So I told them hell no once we got the proposal, but now I have a proposal showing how much I can charge for my house. I really didn't want to have my house in a Google commercial, and then it's just kind of weird. So anyway, I don't even know that, just side note, just useless fact for all of you. So the second thing that I do to turn deductions or expenses into deductions is I have an intellectual property company because I write books and I do all this kind of stuff, and so we're doing videos. And in an intellectual property company, one of the things that we classified is a production company. So anytime I'm buying clothes and I go speak somewhere on stage, I write those off as a uniform because it's on camera. Now, I actually had a CPA at my last workshop say, how do you do that? And I had to tell her how to do it. She didn't know how, because she had always told people you can't write it off. But the thing is, I'm wearing different clothes, and I consider them a uniform, and I keep them at the office, and I keep them in the basement where we have another studio where we might film from my house. And so when I got audited years ago, it was allowed. Why? Here's the number one reason. I had a connection and a story. Your expenses become deductions if you have a story of how it relates to the business. I know they make it seem like it should be more complicated than that. It's actually that simple. So my CFO, if he's traveling somewhere, even though he's going to see family, but he's going to have at least one business meeting, he emails ahead of time. He documents that in a nice folder. What I do is I print out an American Express bill and I write with really sloppy handwriting what the expense was for. Just document. In whatever way you do it, don't let the excuse of getting it documented be something that holds you back. But turning your expenses into deductions is a really big deal to save a bunch of money. One word of caution now. If that expense that has become a deduction is 20% or more of your overall tax deductions for that year, just know that if it's ever disallowed, that's a 25% penalty. So just be careful with that. Make sure it's a really clear-cut story and that it's well documented, okay? So I like to pay my kids, I get to pay my kids $6,300, and that's tax-free. I'm actually paying them $1,000 a month because one of them's going through the Amazing Selling Machine course right now because we have a bunch of clients from amazing.com. So I pay him to go through that course, and he's going to be a business partner because I'm going to make him start a business so that he can get a real education and that we have a chance in this world, right? I love that you get all these extra, soapboxes in this. And then my other son, he's 8, so I'm writing a kid's book because I feel like I can really influence people on financial philosophy if I can keep it simple enough for an 8-year-old and put it in a book for kids. And then I can do a lot more fun media rather than adversarial media with like CNBC. So I'm paying my kids for that. So the first $6,300 is tax-free, but then the next piece is only 10% tax. That's a lot lower tax rate than what I'm paying. So that's turning an expense, because kids are an expense. Anyone have kids? They're expensive, Like I spend a lot more on them than I expected, but they're cute and you love them, so you're willing to do it. So I might as well make it a little bit tax efficient along the way. So turn your expenses into deductions. Then the next thing, so that's strategy 1. Strategy 2, reclassify your income. Reclassify your income. So if you don't have, there's so many ways to reclassify your income. At lunch, what I was talking about is because I have intellectual property, I can actually have a separate intellectual property company, and I can actually have some of my income be capital gain income. Capital gain for me is about half of what my ordinary income tax rate is. So every time I can get paid for intellectual property or the sale of that intellectual property, then all of a sudden that becomes a capital gain type of transaction, especially the way it's structured. There's more detail, but I'm just trying to get you to think. The other thing, taking ordinary income to capital gain, at lunch that we were talking about is, there was someone at lunch that was doing $7 million of revenue, so I said, hey, have you thought of setting up your own insurance company as a C Corp? You can put up to $1.2 million this year, $2.2 million next year, and then you can manage it like an insurance company, so it's conservative investing. But then if you ever have a risk that you need to pay for, that's tax-free. If you don't, you can pull that out and it's a capital gain. Once again, going from 40%, more like 20%. So that's one way to reclassify income. Let me give you the simplest way to reclassify income that will apply to everyone in the room to some degree, all right? So if you own a building, for example, charge yourself the highest possible rent because that's a 1099 more passive income than W-2. If you look at what you do on a daily basis, see what you would pay someone else to do the same thing, which should be less than what you're paying yourself, and only pay yourself that much or less in salary and take the rest of your income through distributions, because distributions don't get hit with self-employment tax. Self-employment tax is 15.3%. Even when that's maxed out, you still have Medicare and Medicaid at 3.2%. And when you're making more than $250,000, then it goes up to another 3.7% penalty for making an income. So if you can take it as a passive income instead of active, you avoid all that tax. So find every way you can do that, which might be the type of corporation you set up. You could be an S corporation and pay yourself what I call differentiating income, salary versus distributions. That would be an example of taking more passive income. Or once again, could you license your IP to your company? Because even if you don't do the big transaction I did, you're still going to get it where it's a 1099 type of structure versus a W-2, which will be lower taxes. So there's so many ways to reclassify income, and there's so many opportunities when you do that. So here's strategy number 3, or the third part of the framework, which is really on you first and foremost, but there's like 5 pieces to it, okay? The first thing is you gotta be proactive. If you're not actually meeting with your tax team every quarter, even if it's only for 10, 20 minutes, meeting with them before you send off your quarterlies, you're overpaying tax. If you're talking to your accountants right now about 2015's taxes, you overpaid. If you're not talking to your accounting team about 2017 and beyond right now, you're far too behind and you're gonna overpay on your taxes. So you wanna be proactive, which means if you don't like doing this stuff, hire a controller, hire someone that keeps this information for you so you could leverage and do the things that you're very best at. Then, if you found that you've been sloppy at all along the way, or you don't feel a high level of confidence in your accountant, or you just wanna do something that I would consider smart, every 3 years, have a different set of eyes look at your taxes, because you can go back 3 years and amend your returns. This just reminds me of my buddy. His name's Mike. He lives in Illinois. You know, talking to him, he joined our program way back in 2008, and he's like, this is awesome. I'm like, cool. Next thing you're gonna do is meet with the accountant. He goes, oh, no, I don't need to meet with the accountant. I have the very best accountant in the world. And I'm like, what's the name of your town? Do you guys have an airport? And he's like, oh, yeah, we have a private airport. I'm like, exactly. Like, I don't even know where that place is. You don't have the best accountant in the world, I assure you. So what we did is we looked back for the last 3 years and we found he'd missed $100,000 in tax advantages. So he was able to amend and get that money back. Plus, he wasn't incorporated, even though he's doing $1 million plus of revenue. You want to incorporate just to protect your ass, but also because you can save on tax. So we did the whole differentiating income thing I told you about. That was $10,000 a year for him in tax savings. But then he owned a building. Anyone here own their own commercial building by chance? If you own a commercial building, you can actually bring in an engineer, do what's called the cost segregation study, and we're able to get him another $10,000 a year in tax advantages, because normally you have to wait 39 years to get tax advantages fully on a building, but if you have an engineer come in, you might be able to get it in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. So $20,000 a year moving forward, $100,000 back. I was right, he was wrong. I let him know it because I'm that kind of friend. And but at least I gave him a big check in doing that. Now, let's fast forward to 2013. He gets audited. So the first thing, because we're friends, he's like, I hate you, you're an asshole, I'm going to jail. I know this couldn't have been, it's too good to be true. I'm like, dude, don't even go to the audit, it's not even gonna matter. So I made a bet with him. If we didn't save him money in the audit, then I would pay whatever he owed if we didn't save him money. But if I saved him money, then he had to take me to a Chicago Bears game because he's a big Bears fan, all expenses paid, and it had to be good tickets and a decent hotel and take me to a nice restaurant. Basically, he became my bitch, right? If I could save him money or not. So that's what we did. We went back and we were able to go with the auditors and just basically be really nice to them, give them every bit of information they wanted and all the documents, and they just signed off on everything. It was very short. But at the end, we said, hey, by the way, Mike doesn't really write off his vehicle, I think, very aggressive. What do you think? All of a sudden, because we were nice to them, and they're not always used to being treated that way, and because we were professional, we were organized, we were calculated with every deduction we had a story behind all the expenses, we got $5,500 more in tax deductions for him through the audit. So, needless to say, I spent $2,000 of that for him very easily because he was worried. So I just share that story because amending is a big deal. I had 2 partners die in a plane crash back in 2006, and for 4 months, I did not make good financial decisions. I just didn't communicate with my team. It was chaotic. I tried to keep our whole business going. We had 42 employees. It was very personality-based at that time. So I actually got to go back in 2008 and amend my returns from 06, and I got $54,000 back, and I do this every day. So if you get above $1 million in revenue, it's time to start considering a tax attorney to work with the CPA. If you're not meeting quarterly with your tax team, you're probably overpaying on your tax. And every 3 years, get a second set of eyes, even if you love your accounting team, to come in and see if there's anything that's been missed, because your team might get in a rut and always look at it the same way, or they might just miss some of the things that are out there and available to you. And so we did that with a guy in Florida, and we found $120,000 of additional tax deductions. His accountant only took advantage of like 35,000 of them, but I was like, we were just the second opinion firm. I mean, I think that was well worth the hour that he spent, and it's too bad that his accountant wouldn't see the whole picture, but whatever, I mean, it's still a bunch of money in his pocket. And there's a lot of money for you just by saving tax. So now you know the framework. Don't just defer. And by the way, if you have a bunch of money in a retirement plan and you're upset about it, I'll give you my book, Killing Sacred Cows. So when you fill out that card, you can do one of 3 things on that card. Number 1, you can ask for what would the Rockefellers do. You can just put WWRD, and I'll give you a copy of that. You could put Killing Sacred Cows. Unfortunately, Killing Sacred Cows is out of print. I've been buying used copies. I just got the library book version of one yesterday that actually had the place to slide in the card, had the Dewey Decimal number on it, and the plastic coating. So I'll just send that in a PDF. And if you ever want to talk to someone on our team, just to find out if you're leaking money. Now, we're doing this because we want to build a relationship, and if we can find a bunch of money that's leaking for you, I know it'll be shocking that we can actually help you and that we could help you with those services and you could even hire us. But their goal is going to be just to ask you questions to find out if you're losing and leaking money. So you can put, for that, we call that a cash flow overview, just finding ways to boost your cash flow. So you could put CFO, you could put WWRD or KSC, or you could just write all 3, and we'll get you all 3. And by the way, just make sure it's legible and give us the easiest way to get a hold of you, because we're not going to chase you down. So if you want our help, just make sure we know the right number to call, that we don't get some gatekeeper or something like that, and we'll be happy to give you these gifts and kind of give you some more insight, because Killing Sacred Cows is kind of like a book that gives business owners permission to succeed. It gives you a language and framework that you'll already resonate and feel with deep down inside, but every other financial person that's tried to derail you or made you feel guilty has led you astray with. And so it helps you identify that misinformation so clearly that it's not like you have a bunch of strategy to implement after you do the book. You'll just be able to know how to move forward very clearly, so it's a permission to succeed type of book. What with the Rockefellers, on the other hand, shows you how to rig the financial game in your favor, because right now it's rigged against you. I mean, here's how simple it is to understand how rigged against you it is. If you're a bank, what do you want from people? This is where you guys answer. This is not rhetorical. Money, right. How often? Every minute. How long do you want to hold on to it for? And how much do you want to give someone back when they come to ask for a withdrawal? As little as possible, right? That's what we're faced with. Yet there's certain things that they do with their money that the Rockefellers figured out. And they started doing the same, like the Rockefellers started doing the things the banks were doing, so they boost their liquid savings up to 4% instead of 1%. They found ways to protect it from liability and bankruptcy. They didn't participate in the downside of the stock market, but when things went bad, they had a liquid amount of cash that they could utilize. Unfortunately, far too many business owners are so fully invested that they're illiquid. Not being liquid is one of the biggest travesties a business owner could face, because first of all, it gives you incentive to chase bad clients and bad profits. It's stressful. So I think having liquidity, the reason that most people don't have it, is what financial planner gets paid to get you a savings account? I told you to take one action, set up a wealth capture account. We don't make money if you do that. I just know that if people start doing that, businesses are going to succeed. And for me, I want 1 million business owners to get economic independence, because if they do, they get exponential growth. And me as a customer, I get exponential value. And I'm cut from that same cloth, because when I was 22 years old, I walked into something called the Rockefeller-style family office. And if you're worth $50 million or more, you got to go into this office and you got to sit around a table where you had accountants and attorneys and fiduciaries and cash flow people and insurance professionals all working on your behalf and saying, this is an A team. This is like the best of the best. And you know what? Their number one focus was to save on tax. And so I sat there and I'm like, I was 22, I came from a small town, wasn't worth $50 million, so at first I was fascinated, but that quickly turned to frustrated. Because I started to think, why do these guys get the best advice, and this is why they have sustainable wealth? They're not speculating and taking all their risk in the stock market. They built their money with their business and they found ways to preserve and protect it. And they have people looking out for them that can do real due diligence. In the world of finance, due diligence is like Sasquatch. You hear about it all the time, but no one's ever seen it, right? Because it's hard to do due diligence if the person is making a commission selling you something. At a family office like the Rockefellers designed, no one's selling anything other than they're charging a massive fee to protect your money, preserve it, and make sure it's perpetuated. So in what would the Rockefellers do, I share that methodology so that you can now have that insight on how did they perpetuate wealth and actually have more along the way and stop making certain financial mistakes. And then the one-on-one phone call, I'll just make sure if you're in this room, you talk to Garrett. Now you're gonna think it's Garrett. I almost didn't hire him because his name was too close to mine and that was confusing as hell. But this is a guy that was so awesome. Every time there's an Apple store close to us, and he kept working with a bunch of the people at our firm when we'd go over there, and everyone's like, this guy's awesome. So we recruited him away. That's how you get A-teamers. You find out people who are employed, that love what they do, and you sell a better vision. And I just said, Steve Jobs is dead, and so is the heart of this company. Come to our company. And we convinced him. So anyway, Garrett is someone who just has a huge heart. He's so caring, and there is no judgment regardless of where you're at. Almost every business owner feels like they should be further along. Doesn't matter. The job for him, identify where you have leaks in the bucket so you know what to go out and plug. All right? All right, so I have just a couple minutes if there's any questions. Great. Then that means that we can end early and get the right people up here to keep giving you some insight. But I'll just say, make sure when you invest, forget about accumulation and focus on cash flow. Go for economic independence, plug the leaks first, continually expand your business, and that's gonna make a world of difference. And if some financial person comes and they're worried about taking your money because of the latest, greatest investment, say no, save the time, and put it back into your business, and you'll have exponential growth. Thanks.
Thank you. No questions for Garrett. We've got a few minutes. Let's head over to the microphone.
What's up, Garrett? My name's George.
What's up, George?
What would you say about student loans? Would you try to pay them off as fast as possible?
I would say this. We all have what's called cost of money. So cost of money is your highest net, best rate of return. So it has to be sustainable. But let's say that you could earn 5% and your student loans cost you 2%. Do you think you should pay them off? Probably not. But let's say they keep you up at night every night and it feels like you just can't live until those things are paid off. Then you might choose to pay them off. But here's the deal. Don't collapse method and objective. If your objective is to pay it off, don't just pay extra to that. Build a system where you have control of your money, you have access to it, and you have liquidity so that you're not really overstretched and illiquid, and then you can pay them off in one fell swoop. But we have this guy on our team, his name's Tim Carden, and once I used to just tell people, oh, if you have student loans, there's not much you can do. And then I said that in an event, and he stood up on my team. He's like, actually, you can do this, this, and this, and here's how you can change the balance structure, and here's how you change the interest rate. So there's some pretty amazing things that you can actually do to get better rates or to get better structures with student loans. I would go there first. And then second, I would create a strategy, which if you dive into some of our stuff, look at our cash flow index. Because cash flow index will teach you, if you are gonna pay something off, you only focus on one loan at a time, never more than one, and which ones to actually strategically pay off that boost your credit score, because once that credit score is boosted and you have the right cash flow reporting, you can negotiate better interest rates with every other loan you have. So it's really about making sure you still have access to money in the bigger picture.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. Are you actually asking a question? That's the real question.
I am not asking a question. No, I honestly just wanted to say something, Garrett, kind of a public thanks to you. I've said this over the phone, but Garrett, what he's talking about here, remember hearing it for the first time, and it just is like, wow, we have lots of leaks in our business. And Kim and I have been able to, over the last 12 months, this is not, he had no idea I was coming to the mic, but Kim and I have been able to plug all of those leaks and get about 80% of the way to economic independence with our passive income coming in every single month.
Don't expect that fast. That's
No,
pretty
no,
damn
no, no,
fast.
no.
We say 3 to 7 years. There's a few overachievers in the room like Pete.
But here's the other thing. Here's the biggest thing is that you found $1,900 a month from my grandmother who lost her husband 2 years ago, and she had no idea of money that was leaking in her business, or not in her business, in her life, in her elderly age. And your team found that for us. And the stuff he's talking about, like, take it seriously. Go find these leaks, because we've gotten a lot of money back from the IRS because of doing what you taught up here on the stage. So thanks for that, man.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Garrett.
Hey, how's it going, man?
My name is Scott.
Thanks for laughing at my jokes. I really appreciate that, Scott.
They were good, and your enthusiasm was really
My wife
awesome.
told me if I wanted to be a comedian, we would starve as a family. So just heads up on that.
You could tweak it a little.
Yeah.
You'd work it out, I think. I recently set up a family and a business trust.
Okay, great.
As well a foundation. So I'm going to start incorporating 1041s. Does your group get into that part as well, those
Yep.
vehicles? And as well, what's your opinion on the whole life dividend paying policies?
So in What Would the Rockefellers Do, I have quite a bit of opinion on it. I feel like most people don't structure them properly, but if structured properly with the right type of company, it could be a good storage vehicle. I don't see it as like the ultimate only place to put your money, but as a place to store it, to boost your savings return, and to access money along the way and have some tax favor. You really have to make sure it's not completely commissionable policies. It's high cash type policies that pay up early so that you have a lot of flexibility in them. But when you get that book, you'll get a good lesson on how to handle those.
Fantastic. Yeah, I had put in money. I changed my IRA into a Roth IRA, and my accountant's all high on how the great savings are. And I'm like, but I'm also looking at this other policy. I'm like, holy shit, I can be saving so much more money and utilizing my own ideas on investing and savings and not worrying about what that tax has later in life. But excellent. Thank you, Garrett.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I don't have a question for you. But
I was going to ask if you had a
yeah, I
question.
don't really have a question for you, but I have to tell you, since I haven't seen you. So you did this webinar for my private inner circle group, and she just reported yesterday that just from the webinar that you did, she saved $25,000 just
Nice.
from this content from the webinar.
So do something with what I just talked about.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
and then
love it.
dive in deeper, because she's like, I'm going all in. Anyway,
Nice.
thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank
All right.
you so
Thank you.
much.